My name is Lionel, Lionel, Reiman, Reiman.
Thank you, Lionel. Tell us about your family and your parents, if applicable, and how they came. I know you're from Canada. How did they get to Canada in the first place?
The story begins in Poland before the war, and I don't know how long you want me to go and talk about it, but briefly, my dad and mom came from two shtetls, little towns in Poland. My dad came from Sokolov, Podlask, and I think about 7 or 10 kilometers away was Kosovo, and that's where my mom was born. And I think and they went to Bialystok, which was the more of a place where they can get a job. And my father got a job there. He opened up a little shoes. He was a shoemaker, and he fixed shoes. And they got married, I think, in 1934, 35. I sometimes get mixed up with at that time. And then my father was very sick. My mother nursed him. I think she had one miscarriage, one premature birth, and then she had another baby before me. And until the war broke out, 1939. In 1939, my aunt, my father's youngest sister, her name was Malka, lived with my parents, and she had a boyfriend in the Polish army. Now he was with the cavalry, and the reason why he was in the cavalry is because he was a strapping fellow, and he did not look Jewish. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. And when somehow they met in the street, they got introduced, and talking about my aunt and uncle that they came to be, and he was supposed to go to the front in 1939. However, his horse, his commander's horse, was lame, so he told this is the story that he told me. He said, he addressed him by his surname, Feldman, I need to take your horse. And they're gonna go to the front, closer with it, to prevent the Germans that time. So here's the situation where a troop of cavalry going against the German tanks. Well, you know what happened. According to my uncle, they were completely wiped out, except for my uncle, because he didn't go there. He changed into civilian clothes immediately, ran off to Bialystok, and meanwhile he was from a family of 3 or 4 brothers, and they all came and they ran away from the Germans, and they went to Bialystok. That was the eastern part of Poland. They stayed there, and the Germans came to Bialystok, but as soon as they came, pretty soon afterwards, they moved out because of the Russian-Russian agreement. I think the Molotov-Ribbentrop agreement, and they divided up Poland into to the east side and the west side. My father, when he grew up, he must have been a member of the Communist Youth Party. That's what my son thinks. And that's one of the story. And he was arrested by the Russians, and my mother and my aunt, who was living with us at that time, did not know where he was. But at that time, they made him confess that he was a spy, and they shipped him off to the eastern Russia, into the Siberia, in an area called Krasnoyarsk. 4 months later, after he was, they thought that he was dead. They don't have any idea what it was. Of course, nobody knew anything about my father. I think around not Christmas time. Sorry, that was around Passover time, because that was right around the initial September 1st is when the Germans attacked the Russians came in probably about the third week or second week in September, and the Germans withdrew from there. And so the Russians came to where my mother was, because I don't know how they survived at that time, but meanwhile, they sold whatever they had. There was always a black market to buy some food. And my mother had a little girl at that time, my older sister. And the authorities came and they said, "You're Malka Reiman." That's my mother's name was Malka. And same as my aunt's, by the way. So she, said, and she said, "Well, you have to come with me. We're sending you away tomorrow." And my older sister was sick. She was supposed to go to the doctor that next day, but my aunt, bless her, she decided that she wasn't going to let my mother and a little baby go on a train nowhere. So she said, I'm not leaving you go by yourself. So she joined with my mother. My aunt's boyfriend, who was staying with them, and his brothers decided, and he said, I'm not leaving her. So that was love at first sight. So and of course there was not a palatial place where they had one room, and the front of the area was where my father worked, and the rest in the back is where they all slept, about 8 or 9 people in one little room. Well, they went to the train station the next day, and my aunt and my uncle were married by. They had 3 witnesses, and one of the ladies gave her a ring and said, "You are married," and that was it. And that's how they got married. This way, we survived, because it took about 2 to 3 months. I talked to my aunt a lot, and she was kind of not completely clear how long it took. During the trip, my sister did not survive. So she was they gave her body to somebody to bury from the train, and every place they went, they had to sell off a few more things to get more food.
Was this all on a passage to Canada?
No.
Not a direct?
No.
Not where you were heading, where they were heading?
No, they were going east, away from the Germans. That was
okay.
1939. That was 1940. And there was peace between the Soviet Union and Germany, Nazi Germany. But so let me.
So, tell me how did they get to Canada?
How did Canada? Okay.
Yeah, how did that come in?
You see,
right.
I got sidetracked
Go ahead.
because the stories always amazes me that what happened is because everybody would say, well, the nasty Russians, the Soviets sent us away. But by sending us away to Siberia, we survived, because we wouldn't have survived otherwise. After my father was in a labor camp for a year and a half, and he was about less than 100 pounds by the time they freed him, and he knew somehow he was communicating. I think they let him write letters, so he communicated with his sister-in-law, one of the sister-in-laws that was still in Poland, in between the 1939 and 41 when the Germans attacked the Soviet Union. And so she knew where my mother was, but she didn't know exactly where. So he found a way to get to my mother's, and that's where I was born, in the Soviet Union, in Kazakhstan in 1940, the end of 42, December 28th. We stayed in the Soviet Union until 45 or 46. My first language at that time, the first thing that I was starting is I understood Yiddish, but I spoke Russian to my parents. But I was only 2.5 years old, so it wasn't that much. And when my parents headed back to Poland, everybody told them, don't go there, there's nothing there for you. And sure enough, they didn't. I don't think they ever went back to Sokolov or Bialystok. They went right to the border, to Stettin, and they got together with a young group. Now, my parents were at that time 27, 25 years old or so, and so there were like 18 and 19-year-old people who survived the war. They formed little kibbutzim and groups, and they paid off the guards, and they went into the American zone. So for the next 2 years, from 46 to 48, we were in a DP camp called Reiman, New Free Man, which was just outside Munich. And that's my first memories come from there. When I remember the playing around and being with and seeing like train tracks that were all bombed out over here. But then in 48, my father said, I'm tired of living among Gentiles. I want to live with Jews. So he wanted to go to Israel before Palestine, before it was Israel. And my mother was a little bit more pragmatic, rational. He said, we're not going there until it's okay. So once the State of Israel was formed, we were there, I think, probably like 2 or 3 months later. We spent 4 years in Israel, where I grew in Haifa, and then we found out that we had relatives. My mother had some relatives that left her mother when she was 9 years old, and they settled in Detroit and in Montreal. We could not get into Montreal, so we went out to the United States. So we ended up in Montreal, and there were like 4 brothers. Why did they leave? Because they didn't want to get drafted into the Tsar's army. That's 100% of that was the case. So we spent 18 years. I spent 18 years in Montreal. Luckily, I met Gloria
Your wife?
in my summer camp. And like they were saying, the rest is, then what happened? How did we get to Dallas?
Well, wait, before that.
Okay.
Where did you go to college?
I went to McGill University in Montreal.
Okay.
And I went to medical school at McGill University as well.
Okay.
And we weren't well off at all in those days. So I was just lucky that I grew up in Montreal. I went to a local college, so I lived at home, and I earned some money and got some scholarships, so I was able to go through to college and medical school.
Did you actually set up practice there before coming here?
No, those years I did 1 year of rotating internship. That's just like us. And then after that, I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I did like a first year residency, thinking I'm going to be a family doctor. And then halfway through that year, I decided I was going to become an obstetrician. So I get a phone call in the middle of February, 25:30 below zero in Montreal, from the chairman or the acting chairman of Parkland Hospital, saying, if you want it, we have a place for you. So I didn't want to do anything without my wife. We were married 2 years at that time. And she said, we're going to Texas. We have cousins in Texas, but she had no idea where they were. So I said, well, honey, Texas is a big state. Tell me, do you have any idea? I don't know. I'll look around. I'll ask my mother. And as it happened, they were in Dallas, because I don't know if we were going to Houston or San Antonio or anywhere. So here we are, and we decided to go, and that was the first time my wife ever left home, or she ever traveled anywhere.
Did you have any other choices or any other possibilities before settling here? Looking around at all, or this was it?
Well, I decided to take the offer to be trained over here. It was a very noted program, and I knew I was going to get real good training. And all our intentions was to go back to Montreal. And during the time that we were here, there was a lot of political unrest in Quebec. So I decided, Gloria and I decided, we will take a 2-year hiatus and see what goes on, because there's going to be an election in Quebec. But it wasn't getting any better. I had a friend of mine who told us, one of the visits that I visited my parents, and he said they're talking about the French Canadians over there. They're separatists. They don't like you. They don't want you there. It's not your place. If you have a chance, don't come back. So we went to California for 2 years, because we had a real good friend in Los Angeles area, and so we spent 2 years over there. And the reason why we came back is because I did not train there, so I didn't know how to have any contacts, and also I couldn't afford a home over there. And my wife was pregnant with Stevie, the 3rd child. So I said, I can probably do pretty well in Dallas area. So I came back, and nobody was usually I thought I'd be able to get a doctor who's well established and needs some help on work out. I wasn't able to do that, so I said, well, the hell with it, I'll go ahead and start myself.
Start your own.
So, which I did.
Before coming here, though, what types of things were you involved in back in Montreal, either Jewishly and or civically?
Well, I guess I was a receiver mostly because I went to summer camp as a teenager. Then I joined it's called the YMHA, the Young Men's Hebrew Association. I was a counselor at a camp, and that's where I met my wife Gloria. And not when I was a counselor, but I came back to visit that camp, and my best friend was the head counselor there, and his girlfriend was rooming his girlfriend was rooming with Gloria. So when I came to visit them, she was Yente the matchmaker, actually. And what she did was she told me that after I met her, she made sure that I introduced to her, and she said, you know, that guy Lionel, she told her, he's just can't stop talking about you. And she did the same thing to me. Says, you know, that girl Gloria, she thinks you're terrific. So she looked at me, I looked at her, and the rest is history.
Were you guys, as a young married couple, involved in any Jewish or otherwise other organizations, and was it because your parents were also, or did it have nothing to do with their affiliation?
No, Montreal is where we lived is a very Jewish area. And it's somebody described it as a bunch of shtetls together, except and especially around in the late 40s and early 50s, where Montreal is different than any other place because they had a Bialystoker organization, they had people from Warsaw, they had lodgers, and then they had Romanians, Russians. And everyone started their own little synagogue, and we would, and so I wasn't active in any organizations at all. The reason why I'm saying I was a receiver because they set up everything, and just like Gloria went to a high school that was 1,500 and probably 1,450 were Jewish, I went to a high school, Barrenbing High School, which was probably 97% Jewish. So they were very heavily, were segregated by choice and by economic ways. There's no laws against us going anywhere there, but nobody wanted to live with French Canadians. We didn't have any, or there was an Italian area there. Then after a while, the Greeks came in and they displaced the Jews in the old area. So that's how...
How were you guys received here when you came to Dallas by the Jewish community?
Very friendly, extremely friendly, and there's two. Part of that is when we first came in 1970. The first year is completely a blur. I was working on usually 4 months. I worked 24 hours on, 24 hours off, and the rest of the time I worked every third night. All night. So I was, and plus the fact our salary was $5,500 or $6,000, and actually, and we had one car for a while, and then we were able to spring for another car with the money we got from our wedding presents, and that was it. That's all the money we had.
How would you describe what early Dallas, I call it, looked like when you came down?
Early in 1970, it was a lot of. I would get on LBJ and I can go anywhere within 10 minutes.
Wasn't even built then, 1970, because
no.
I lived right next to it. It was built in the mid-70s.
Mid-70s, but we came back in 1975.
Then it was built.
Built, yeah.
Right.
But I think, actually, there was I remember 1970 when we came.
Was there a stretch of it, maybe?
Yeah, there was a stretch to the north side because we came down on 35, I think, from Denton, and then we got on, and I asked, of course, there's no MapQuest or anything else. So at that time, I'd have to stop at a gas station and say, well, how do you get there? And they said, well, you can take Royal Lane all the way. I think that was Harry Hines or that area. And so we did LBJ, We got off in Hillcrest, and Hillcrest was a 2-lane highway without any sidewalks, and with like big drop-offs on either side. And everything was dark, and like she told you, a policeman stopped us and said, where are you going? So I said, we're going to see our cousins there. So they followed us. So
How did you pick Tiferet for your synagogue when you
it was
joined one?
more to what we're used to in Montreal. Montreal is a very large Orthodox community, and everybody who's not Orthodox, they would be conservative, but that would be like a traditional, which is what Tiferet Israel is. Except that there's no mixed seatings, there's no mechitza and over there. And plus, there's like for the woman, there's a gallery for the ladies or off to the side. So it's the old tradition. Now everybody if they have to drive, they drive, but they would never. There's no parking lots, so they'd park off a couple of blocks away and walk, so they didn't show that they used a car.
So you've been here for quite a while, and how would you say, in your words, how has Dallas changed?
It's gotten very busier. There's the Jewish community. There was 3 synagogues when we started. We were active as young couples in 1970-73. That was our social life with Ort, and they'd have some parties and this type of thing, so we got together. My friend Ron Dubner was called, you know him, Ron. Well, he was, I think one time, I think we were here, but we just moved into our apartment, and he calls, my wife says, Gloria, when I came home one time, says, the strangest thing, somebody called us and invited us for dinner. I said, who is this? Well, it's Ron Dubner. Okay, so how did he know that? I think he got us that we're newcomers, but we thought that Mike told him to call us because Mike knew his father and used to play cards with his father. So since then we've been friends.
Right.
That time, and so he's my local yokel.
And they're lovely people.
Yeah, very nice.
Tell me about your relationship with your children and your grandchildren a little bit.
It's very close. We've always when they were young, I would always make sure that I had sometimes somebody's clean. You're calling?
No, not me.
Not
You
me.
know what? I think it's me.
Okay.
Mine's off.
Okay. Here, I knew somebody was calling me. Sorry for the
That's
interruption.
okay. Were all of your children born here? Let's see, 1970.
71, Susie was born
Okay.
March 28th, so she'll be 43.
Okay.
And Michael was born in California, so he's the only odd man out.
Okay.
But Stevie and Alyssa were born all in Presbyterian Hospital.
Okay. And what kind of life do you think they had here? I know it sounds vague, but just in general, living here in Dallas compared to where they might have still been in Montreal or somewhere else for that matter.
Well, I think it's much more organized as far as the Jewish community and Jewish stuff. I don't know, I didn't raise a family in Montreal, but I think to a certain extent it's probably the same sort of thing. When I grew up in Montreal, you didn't have any leagues. And the only thing you had is when you were a teenager or a young adult, you'd go to YMHA. They had all kinds of stuff, and they had a really terrific Jewish library, Jewish library. And like Gloria told you, they had like 3 Yiddish schools, and they had one Talmud Torah and one Hebrew school as well. And her numbers are a little bit exaggerated as far as the number of Jews. It was never 250,000. I think the top is 120,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but still, it was quite a bit.
And your children all went? No. Tell us where they went. I know where they went, but tell us where they
Susie went to Akiba.
went. Okay.
And that was the only school available at that time. And I don't know if I would have. Michael started Akiba and switched to Solomon Schechter, and he's the first graduating class of when it was started. And Stevie went to all through Solomon Schechter, and then I guess and Alyssa also was. So there's some teachers who had all three of them as nursery school. Beverly Levine, Beverly
Lewin, right,
Yeah,
right.
she knows all of them.
Right.
And then she did, two of my I think 2 or 3 of my grandkids.
So, how do you feel about their Jewish education going to a Hebrew day school? Do you feel it was very good,
It's very-
adequate?
Yes, it's very adequate. I think I would really recommend that. I think the reason is we felt in Montreal you can get away without going to Jewish day school, because even though I went to it's called the Protestant School Board of Greater Montreal, it was all Jewish. They would close all Jewish holidays. And not only they had an agreement that we would have off 2 days in, the first 2 days of Passover, the last 2 days of Passover. Sukkot, 2 days, and last 2 days. Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, that was all, we didn't take off for Purim. That's not.
Well, it's minor, yeah.
It's minor, but
Right.
but we get all those holidays. So sometimes we would miss like a whole month of school because it was the wrong time. And they would close up my school, and they would close up Gloria and my wife's school
Oh.
because there's no students weren't there. It wasn't. So I don't know what they did. The other non-Jews.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Tell me one outstanding memory that you have thus far of your life here in Dallas.
Outstanding is the kids were born here, 3 out of 4, and we have had 2 out of 3 marriages here. So they're all terrific. Great family, and I was telling you, even though I was busy with my practice, I was still a soccer coach for many years. So I made sure that they were active, and I would take them skiing. I was able to do that. We'd go to California one time, and Montreal. We went in Toronto, where my sister used to live in Toronto. So we'd visit over there. So we try to keep close with our relatives in Montreal.
Have other family members or good friends moved here?
My sister-in-law moved here after we did.
Okay.
And the main reason is because they felt that their time in Quebec was limited. And so if they're going to make a move, they said, well, might as well, we would love to be in the same city as you are. So we get together every Friday nights, and so we have a Friday night dinner
Very good.
together.
Okay. What else, Dr. Reiman, would you like to add about your life here in Dallas? No, I know what I want to ask you. Do you have any regrets about coming to Dallas, Texas?
I have a little regret because I was never able to, my parents weren't able to, Gloria's parents, to see the kids grow up, their grandkids. Yeah.
So would there have been a place you would have rather have been so they could have seen that?
No.
No?
No.
Europe? Okay.
No, because once you put everything together, there's always a choice. There's always you have to make a decision, and the way you go on, and you don't really think about it. And of course, what's important for you as you grow up, in your early years, is not as important as when you get older. And you look at it as, because most of I'm 71 years old, and I'm in my 7th decade. I'm not a young guy anymore.
Yes, you are. We think you are.
Well, thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add for the interview? Anything you want to share with us?
No, Oh, you want to tell me our Russian relatives?
Right. That's right.
We came we came back to Dallas after 2 years in California, in 1975. A couple months later, our Gitala Alevskovsky and her husband and daughter Alexandra came from Leningrad. At that time, it was still the Soviet Union. A couple years later, that side of the family, because Gitala's mother was a sister to my late father-in-law and Mike's father. So that's how the Goldfarbs, and then they kept in touch. And Mike, when he was alive, and before it was open, he made sure he would go to the Soviet Union, bring them some whatever, make their life a little bit, and it was, and of course they had to meet, and they were scared. They told stories where in the Soviet Union, one of our cousins, his name is Mark, he was an engineer, so he was worried he's going to lose his job because of that. They're all here. They all were able to just have one child that was, Gitala and Anatol, they moved off to New Jersey, where Alexandra has 2 kids, has a very successful business, a marriage, and everything else. And she's really like an American success story. Yes?
Name of the business.
Oh, I don't, she was dealing with the women situation. I don't know exactly, but it was an internet business that she did. And but her, Alexandra, is graduated from high school at 16, graduated from Texas University of Texas at 19, spent 2 years on Wall Street as doing something, and then got her MBA. So
How many people was Mike successfully able to bring over here, Mike Goldfarb?
all on his mother's side, he brought a couple, Beba and another one. We're not that close with them, so I don't remember it. But he brought the Beck family, B-E-K, and there's a group over here called, she's the second generation, Olga Beck, and her mom is Dina Beck, and her dad is Mark Beck, the engineer. He made it out over there. Boris Beck, unfortunately, passed away a couple of years ago. He was a sick man.
That's quite an incredible success story, though.
Yeah, he
That's
did.
Wonderful.
But you see, when they came, he made sure behind the scenes, they got a nice apartment. He took care of everything. Really, Mike was our godfather, so to speak, because and he invited us, we came, and we made sure that. And Oli, no matter what, she would, whatever, how many seders we went there, and how many parties and brunches, whatever, he always included us.
That's wonderful.
So, yeah.
Well, it was beshert that you ended up in Dallas, Texas.
Yes.
And we're glad you did.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.